Madam President, last week, Senator Cardin and I introduced our S-Corporation Modernization Act. That brings the total of tax reform bills I've introduced so far this year to 6. Madam President, 2017 was obviously a banner year for tax reform. In December of 2017, we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a historic, comprehensive reform of our tax code that put more money in American families' pockets and helped spur growth in American businesses. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act has been a great success for our economy and for hardworking Americans. But there are still things we can do to strengthen our tax code even further. As I mentioned, last week Senator Cardin and I introduced our S-Corporation Modernization Act. S-corporations are the most common formal business structure in the United States. There are nearly 5 million of these businesses throughout the United States, including large numbers in rural America. Despite the popularity of S-corporations, however, there have been few S-corporation-related changes to the tax code since this business structure was created. And there are things that we can do to make it easier for these businesses to operate and raise capital. That's why Senator Cardin and I developed the S-Corp Modernization Act. Our legislation makes pro-growth reforms that will make it easier for these businesses to grow and create new jobs and opportunities in their communities. Madam President, change is a human constant, but with modern technology, the pace of change has seemed to accelerate. American workers and American businesses face very different situations than they did even a decade ago. It's important that our tax code keeps pace with a 21st century economy. In February, I reintroduced my Mobile Workforce State Income Tax Simplification Act along with Senator Sherrod Brown. Today, substantial numbers of workers travel to different states for temporary work assignments on a regular basis, and they end up subject to a bewildering variety of state laws governing state income tax. Senator Brown's and my legislation would create an across-the-board standard for mobile employees who spend a short period of time working across state lines. It would ensure that states receive fair tax payments while substantially simplifying tax requirements for employees and employers. In March, I introduced 2 other bills focused on updating the tax code for the 21st century economy. The last decade or so has seen the rise of the gig economy, services provided by individuals through apps and websites like Uber, Lyft, TaskRabbit, Postmates, Grubhub, and many others. These arrangements have stretched the boundaries of current tax law. My New Economy Works to Guarantee Independence and Growth Act, or the New Gig Act, as we call it, updates our tax law to provide clear guidance on the classification of this new generation of workers. It will ensure that Uber drivers, Postmates, Taskers, and others are treated as independent contractors for purposes of tax law if they meet a set of objective criteria. The certainty that my bill provides will benefit not only these workers, but also traditional independent contractors like freelance writers and delivery drivers. I also introduced the Digital Goods and Services Tax Fairness Act in March with Senator Wyden. Our legislation is designed to prevent consumers from being faced with multiple taxes for downloading digital products. For example, right now, a digital purchase of a television series could hypothetically be taxed in up to 3 states, depending on the circumstances of the purchase. The Digital Goods and Services Tax Fairness Act would provide rules of the road for taxing digital goods and services and ensure that digital purchases could only be taxed in one state, the state in which the consumer resides. It would also prohibit states and local governments from taxing digital goods at higher rates than tangible goods. In other words, under our bill, that season of The Office that you want to buy digitally shouldn't be taxed at a higher rate than if you were purchasing the season on DVD. Madam President, we have a proud history of charitable giving in this country. Americans care about a lot of worthy causes and are committed to helping those in need. That's why I've routinely introduced amendments to the tax code to make charitable giving easier, several of which have been signed into law. This year, I again introduced the Charities Helping Americans Regularly Throughout the Year, or Charity Act, with Senator Casey. This year's version of our bill builds on some of the provisions we succeeded in getting passed over the past few years and would continue to help make it easier for Americans to give and charities to receive money. Finally, Madam President, this year I once again introduced legislation to repeal the punitive double or triple taxation known as the death tax. I've worked a lot on the death tax issue over the years because of the way it affects family farms and ranches. The death tax can make it difficult or impossible to hand on the family farm or ranch to the next generation. While we gave farmers and ranchers substantial relief from the death tax in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that relief is only guaranteed for 6.5 more years, which is why I'm committed to passing a permanent death tax repeal. Madam President, I'm proud of the progress we've made for American businesses and American families with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and I will continue working on these bills and others to further refine the tax code to spur economic growth and to address the realities of the 21st century economy.